Test. Welcome back to the Greg Schreffler Show, where we talk about anything and everything that has God in it. Why? Because we gotta. Hope you like the intro music. It's called Epic Adventure by Nikita Kondrashev at pixabay.com. Before we jump into today's episode 13 on Joshua's long day, or the day the sun stood still, I want to take a moment and briefly say a few words about Charlie Kirk. I didn't know him, but I've certainly heard a lot about him. And I just want to try to honor his memory briefly. As you know, he was assassinated September 10th, 2025. I didn't know him personally, but have certainly learned much about him since his assassination. What a remarkable young man. Very talented and gifted in outreach, obviously, right? I mean, he was so successful in reaching out to the youth of America. And I say obviously because it seems he was assassinated for it. I guess Billy Joel's song, "Only the Good Die Young," is true. I know people have had a lot of questions, and I guess I want to put my 2 cents out there concerning the questions. I think one of my questions is, what's it like to be so evil that you would murder or have someone murdered because you disagree with them? I mean, this is something I don't think I'll ever understand. Because it's not hate, it's evil. It's really evil for you to hate someone that much that you want to murder them. That's evil. There's something wrong with you. You need to get help. I got a list of things here I want to say, but I think I'll just skip to the biggest question of all. And that is, why did God allow this to happen? Of course, if we could answer that, then that would make us equal to God. But we can't. And we just have to trust His sovereignty. I want to give you an example of His sovereignty. Man, this is sucking really bad. So why did God allow this to happen? These are just things in life that we may never get an answer for. And we're challenged and pushed in our faith. And we have to continue to trust in God's sovereignty. And I think as you mature in life, especially as you mature spiritually, you're going to learn that God knows what He's doing. It sounds funny to say it that way, but we don't live that way, do we? But I want to share with you a Bible story that is a demonstration of God's sovereignty. This one takes place in 1 Samuel 29, 1 through 11. Achish sends David back to Ziklag. So I don't know if you know this or not, but David, before he became king, he was fleeing from Saul, and the only safest place that he could find from Saul was to live with the Philistines. So he's living with the Philistines, and he's pretending to be their buddy while he goes out and raids their lands. So anyway, let's just read starting with verse 1 here. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" meaning David and his men. Achish replied, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel?" He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine commanders were angry with Achish and said, "Send the man back, that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go out with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Achish called and said to David, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you, but the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers." Verse 8. "But what have I done?" asked David. "What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered, "I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said he must not go up with us into battle. Now get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light." So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. So what's that got to do with anything? Well, if you continue to read the story, which I encourage you to do if you're not familiar with it, and I'm not sure what David's angle was here. I don't know if he was really actually considering fighting against his fellow Israelites. But this is an example of God's sovereignty. He kept David from fighting in this battle because it really would have been kind of complicated, don't you think? If when he becomes king and the people are like, "But didn't he fight us on the side of the Philistines?" So God takes that away. But also, when he turns away from this being turned down here and goes back to his camp, he finds out that his camp has been raided and his two wives have been taken. And all the supplies and all the treasures that they had collected have been raided. And the men were talking about stoning David. So if he had gone out to battle, they would have never been able to recover that stuff. But as it turns out, he goes and finds these raiders and overpowers them and gets his wives back, gets the loot back. But I don't know how eager he was to go into battle with the Philistines. Lots of times we ask stuff from God, or we pray for things that maybe not even related to us. Maybe they're for other people and the benefit of others. And God doesn't work it out the way we hoped he would, and we don't understand why. But there is a reason, and we may not get to know it, but he's sovereign, and we have to have faith in that and trust in that he knows what he's doing. And this was just a small example of a story in the Bible where his sovereignty obviously is displayed all throughout the Bible, but in this particular passage, David was kept from fighting against his brothers so that it made his transition to being Israel's king a lot easier, I think. He was also able to recover his wives and the stash that was looted. And maybe you've been fortunate where you've seen God's sovereignty in your life. You were denied something, turned down, experienced something really bad, but sucked it up, moved on, and later on you go, "Oh, that's why God did that." So yeah, we just got to take him at his word and trust him and have faith. And if our faith was never challenged or exercised, then we would be flabby Christians. Unfortunately, a lot of us are flabby Christians. But anyway, so we don't know why God allowed this to happen. We don't know what's going to come of it, but we do know he's sovereign, and we put our faith and trust and hope in him. And I think what's often hard to understand is the realization that God doesn't owe us an answer. He doesn't answer to us. Do you remember when your kids were too young to understand the answer, and you said, because I said so. Now, how many times have we faced situations like that where we couldn't answer the question, but God couldn't give us the answer because our little minds aren't capable of grasping the answer? Something to think about. But anyway, if you're in this predicament where you're angry at God, because I've been through that personally, of course, we probably all go through this, but you got to be just honest. You know, He already knows what you're thinking, He already knows what you're feeling. So let's not play games and you think that by not saying anything that He doesn't know. So don't kid yourself. Just go ahead and say it. Say, God, I'm angry at you right now. You let this man, a godly man, a faithful servant, a wonderful husband, a beautiful Christian, he was changing lives for the better. Why would you allow this to happen? Ultimately, we don't know. But maybe we'll find out and maybe we won't. But our faith is challenged and we have to press through it. Press on. And trust Him and trust in His sovereignty. But yeah, you got to have this conversation with Him. Just be open about it. I'm angry at you, Lord, because of this. And I need your help working through it. But in the end, we got, like I said, trust in Him, His sovereignty. And the example of His sovereignty was just that little story in the Bible about David. Maybe you don't know what it means. Maybe you don't know how it's applied in your life. Well, you can look at other people's lives and see how it's applied. You know, for us who are continuous Christians, and we look at somebody who was a rock star and lived a hellacious lifestyle and was fast and furious and drugs and alcohol and sex, and, you know, they lived in the limelight and they ate it up. And they had all these admirers and being in the spotlight. And then they come to know Jesus. And we're like, oh, I didn't get to do any of that stuff. And that's okay that you didn't, and you're better for it. But I get what you're feeling. I think I pretty much bombed that. So just to recap, I think it's sad. In a lot of ways, it's sad that he was taken from us at an early age. From my age group, I could say kids are killing kids. What, the killer was 22 and Charlie was 31 or something? I do think that part of his sentencing should be watching Charlie Kirk family videos and photos and watching him talk to other students and just having a conversation with them, having an open debate, a non-threatening debate. And what's sad and disgusting is that there's so many people out there that are saying such nasty things about him. It's just absolutely disgusting, because I know from our perspective, even if someone that we disagree with dies or was killed or was murdered or was assassinated, we wouldn't be running around saying, oh, he got what he deserved. I mean, that is a testament to the nastiness in that person's heart. And that they need some Jesus. Big time. All right, I said my piece. I don't know if it was helpful or not, but I just wanted to say something in honor of his memory, Charlie Kirk. On our last episode, we looked at Sodom and Gomorrah and the evidence that led to some possible outcomes, as well as why did the destruction occur in the first place. Do you know why? Why? Because of unforgiven sin. Or unforgiven sin brings judgment. I mean, yes, sin itself brings judgment. And the reason I say it as unforgiven is because we're all sinners. Even Christians who have confessed their sins and given their lives to Christ, we're still sinners. We're still inadequate. We're still diseased. And only by the blood of Jesus are we able to come into God's presence. But if you have, so we all have sinned. Some of us have asked for forgiveness of it and turned and changed our life. And so that when judgment day comes, it'll be, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Except if you haven't asked for forgiveness, it'll be, depart from me, I never knew you. Yeah, you're going to hell. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, what am I supposed to say? This is what's going to be. And you can laugh and make fun of me and pretend it's not going to happen. But like I've always said, you can pretend that gravity isn't real, or that it doesn't exist, or that it doesn't apply to you. But then go ahead. Test it. See what happens. Anyway, in today's episode 13, we're going to look at another amazing thing God did that has baffled skeptics and inspired believers for centuries. In addition, this may be one of Scripture's most debated miracle. The day the sun stood still for Joshua. Was this a literal suspension of a natural law? A dramatic, poetic description? An eclipse? A black hole? An event horizon? A euphemism? Metaphor? Or something else entirely? And another question is, does it echo ancient traditions from cultures all over the world who remember a long day or night, depending on your geo? Remember how the flood did that? Remember in ancient apocalypse? The flood has stories told in every culture, an interpretation of the flood. Anyway, together we'll explore the biblical records, scientific theories, cultural parallels, insights from teachers like Chuck Missler and Michael Heiser. This is a story that reveals both the hand of God in history and his supreme sovereignty. There's that word again. Be looking for it in your life and maybe other people's lives. Anyway, research brought to you by the usual Bible, internet, ChatGPT, and a lot of links to support what I'm getting ready to tell you or talk about with you. So in our first segment, we're going to talk about the biblical account. But before we jump into the actual part of the sun standing still, air quotes, let's do a lead up. What's going on before all this comes down or before all this goes down? So for that, we're going to start in Joshua chapter 9, verse 1. Joshua 9:1. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. Joshua was making quite a name for himself, huh? In verse 3 now. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They pretended to be from a distant land. They had moldy bread, worn sandals and clothes and sacks. They tricked Israel into making peace with them. Well, how did they trick Israel? That's God's people. Well, it's simple because, and it says right there in the Bible, because they didn't seek the Lord's counsel. They didn't inquire of the Lord. So 3 days later, Israel discovers the Gibeonites live nearby. But they can't attack them now because of the treaty. So they make them woodcutters and water bearers, or slaves. But there's something interesting about the Gibeonites and these people. So now we're going to jump to Joshua chapter 10, beginning with verse 1. Now Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it. Aren't you glad I edit this stuff out? Doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king. And that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. he and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So that's interesting. I mean, the Gibeonites have a larger city, a larger army than what Joshua and Israel already destroyed, and they have good fighters, and they don't engage. Instead, they want to make a treaty. They want to make peace. They did it sneakily or surreptitiously, but it's a testament to these people who don't believe in God, but in a God that they've heard about. And because of their belief in Israel's God, their lives are saved and they're protected. So anyway, back to Adonai-Zedek. He's thinking, well, this sucks because Gibeon has a large army and good fighters. A larger army than I and the good fighters. So his strategies, he's like, okay, well, how do I handle this? So starting at verse 3, so Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. So what kind of strategy is that you're seeing there? Divide and conquer, baby. Yeah, oldest strategy, I guess. So he's not going to go straight into Israel. He's going to say, well, I'm going to start with Gibeon. If I can take them out, and me and my 5 kings and armies together should be able to take them out, even though they're a big city and they got good fighters. We're going to join forces, and we're going to take them out, and then we'll go over and deal with Israel. Verse 6. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. Verse 8. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. That's just, I mean, I don't know if you can see the irony here in verse 8 or the beauty in here in verse 8 or the peace here in verse 8. But what's entertaining to me is that God speaks future tense in present tense. Did you catch what I'm saying? He speaks future tense and present tense. So he's telling Joshua in what would be Joshua's present tense, don't worry about it. These people aren't going to be able to stand. I'm going to give them into your hands. And this hasn't happened yet. So how can we relate this to ourselves? What about us? What are we doing in our Christian lives? What are we afraid of? Hasn't God said to us, I have given them into your hands? Not one of them will be able to withstand you? Shouldn't we stop being cowardly Christians? Well, how do we do that? We put more faith in God and His sovereignty. You got to study that word, and you got to start looking for it in your life, other people's lives, in the countries, in the case of the Bible, and how He watched over these people. All right, verse 9. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. Well, how does He take them by surprise? An all-night march. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that to march from Gilgal to Gibeon, it's 20 miles over difficult terrain. So the element of surprise was crucial in the ensuing battle as it caught the Amorites off guard. That's from Bible Hub. So obviously they weren't expecting them to make 20 miles over rough terrain with all their supplies and arrive in time for them to have to deal with. They didn't want to do this. Here's another example of God's sovereignty. He calls out all the kings and all the unfaithful people. I'm not talking about Israel. I'm talking about these people that are living evil lives, worshiping these lesser gods. And he calls all of them together. Let's take them out with one swing. All right, verse 10. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down. I'll just stop there. Now, what do you do when the Lord throws them into confusion? I mean, how are you going to stand against that? One of the most perplexing things for me as a Christian is understanding what is Satan doing? What is he doing? Does he really think he can beat God? You know, I think I've talked about this before. You and I, as lowly humans, know it's pretty dumb to have this notion in your head that you can outwit God, you're better than God, you can beat God, you can be God above. So for all of Satan's brilliance, that doesn't sound too brilliant, does it? Okay, I got sidetracked, didn't I? And now we get to the meat of what this episode's about. Joshua 10:12 through 14. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jasher, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Yeah, buddy. And we're going to talk about how did this happen scientifically. But I want you to also take note here that Habakkuk 3:11, yes, there's a book called Habakkuk 3:11, says, the sun and moon stood still in their habitation. Could that be referencing this long day of Joshua? And there's a book from the Apocrypha, the Sirach, which affirms Joshua's miracle. Was not the sun held back by his hand, and one day lengthened like two? The Sirach 46:4. The thing about that Apocrypha book is that it's controversial, and I think it used to appear in the Old Testament of Catholic Bibles. But here's the thing, it's not divinely inspired or accepted by Christian doctrines because it teaches salvation through works instead of through faith. But it still has a record of Joshua's long day. Moving on. The text is clear, though. The scriptural text is what I'm referring to. This was an unprecedented event. Was the battle so critical that God extended the day so Israel could finish it? Or was God just answering the prayer of a righteous man? Michael Heiser points out that in the ancient Near East, battles were seen as more than just physical. They were cosmic showdowns between nations' gods. For Yahweh to command the sun and moon was not just an astronomical event, it was a declaration that Israel's God ruled over the very cosmic order. In other words, I don't know why we're built this way, but us humans always worship lesser things. And so we're worshiping these lesser gods, worshiping the stars, we're worshiping the sun, the moon, whatever. Today it's more subtle. We're worshiping technology, we're worshiping activity, and we're worshiping money, worshiping power. But anyway, it's always enjoyable to me to see God just come in and say, yeah, these sun and moon that you guys worship, I rule over them. I'm a God over your lesser gods. You're worshiping lesser gods. And the same thing happened in Egypt with Moses and Pharaoh. All of God's plagues was him saying, or was an attack on the gods the Egyptians worshipped. And again, he's just saying, I'm ruler over your gods. You worship lesser gods. Are we doing that? Are we worshiping lesser gods? What is there in this world that needs to have more attention than God? All right, next segment, we're going to look at some cultural evidence. Echoes around the world. Ancient traditions describe an unusually long day or night. The first one is the rabbinic Jewish tradition, internal to the Bible's world. The Talmud explicitly references Joshua's miracle and debates its scope. Number 2, the Egyptian lore, reported by Herodotus about the Egyptian priests telling of times when the sun reversed its rising and setting. Not necessarily a direct long day link, but at least some kind of cosmic anomaly. Number 3, Polynesian, the Maori Hawaiian mythic echoes. In widely attested Polynesian traditions, the culture hero Maui slows or snares, air quotes, the sun to make the days longer. An explicit motif of extended daylight. These are mythic, not historical, but they show the idea of a day lengthened by an extraordinary act. Number 4, scholarly rereadings of Joshua 10. What the text may mean. Astronomy and geophysicists Humphreys and Waddington from Oxford in 2017, they said that the Hebrew can be read, the sun stopped shining, air quotes, proposing an annular eclipse of October 30th, 1207 BC that lengthened effective battle light via atmospheric conditions. And they also tie it to Egyptian chronology. Whether you accept it or not, it's a peer review with testable claims. And then there's Vetus Testamentum, 1992. Baruch Margalit offers a detailed linguistic exegetical critique of stood still, air quotes, phrasing. He's saying it's more poetic or metaphorical. Chuck Missler loved pointing out that these scattered traditions could be echoes of a single global event, remembered differently by cultures but rooted in a real history. And like I said, remember how the flood is told differently across the global cultures? Missler also points out that 14 ancient calendars are based on 360-day years. All of them changed after 701 BC. And looking at these calendars, we see Mars was worshipped by these ancients. And here's a twisty one for you. How about Gulliver's Travels? You're like, whoa, dude. That just came out of nowhere. Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels in 1726, what's weird about it is that he detailed size, revolution, and orbits of the 2 moons of Mars. Yes, so? Well, he did it 151 years before they were discovered. Kind of bizarre. And now we get to the scientific evidence, the one you've been waiting for. So what actually happened? Several explanations have been suggested. Number 1, eclipse hypothesis, a double dawn, air quotes, interpretation. So that comes from the guys Humphreys and Waddington I just talked about. The Hebrew word conventionally translated stood still, air quotes, could mean dimmed or grew dark, air quotes. Their eclipse models show prolonged dimming, like a double dusk, that could have been perceived as extended daylight. Number 2, alternative eclipse reanalysis. A 21 technical study reevaluated historical eclipses and suggested a total solar eclipse on September 30th, 1131 BC, as the most likely candidate matching the biblical account. Number 3, atmospheric and celestial events, non-eclipse. While not pinpointed to Joshua's time, we know that volcanic eruptions, meteor airbursts, or massive fires can dramatically alter daylight and visibility. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may have said to yourself, why did he skip verse 11? The biblical account also includes hailstones, suggesting meteorological or atmospheric phenomena present at that moment. Verse 11. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the sword of the Israelites. You're like, So was it hail? I mean, we've seen hail. We know hail. We've heard reports of how big a hail can get. We've heard of grapefruit size hail. Hail. I mean, can you imagine one of those just speeding down and smack you on the noggin? Woo. But what's also interesting about that is how come it only killed the Amorites and not the Israelites? So even if you were to say, yeah, well, there was this storm front and it did this and did that, to try to water down this miraculous event going on here, then how did it kill only the Amorites and not the Israelites? It's like people saying, yeah, well, the Red Sea crossing was no big deal, or it was lame, because it was kind of shallow and it was not a big deal. And then, the follow-up question is, how did the Egyptian army drown in it? All right, let's move on to a more fantastical one. Number 4, Mars's near pass-by hypothesis via Chuck Missler. I'm not sure I understand all this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Earth's 360-day orbit and Mars's 720-day orbit were originally on resonant orbits. Every 108 years, they would have a near pass-by that might account for catastrophic events in history. A near pass-by would trigger an energy transfer. These transfers were stabilized in 701 BC, when the Earth's 365.25-day orbit and Mars' 687-day orbit caused their resonant orbits to change to the orbits they are today. Mars was on a polar bypass of around 70,000 miles from Earth. What does that mean? So that's making Mars rise from the horizon 50 times the size of the moon. That's like a sci-fi movie thing you see. Causing severe earthquakes and land tides, followed by meteor showers that rain down on Israel's enemies. And lastly, there was a polar shift of 5 degrees, which resulted in the day being lengthened. Again, I don't know how he did it. I just know he did do it. But let me share with you some other theories. An event horizon. This theory that God placed an event horizon around this section of the universe or solar system. So, suspending time, partly. Suspending the rotation of planets. Well, no, I can't even say that. Suspending the orbit of planets, but not the rotation. Because if the rotation stops, it's like this. If you're in a car going 1,000 miles an hour and it stops, it just stops. Doesn't even skid to a stop. It just stops. Then you're ejected from the car at 1,000 miles an hour. So for the Earth to stop rotating means everything's shooting off into space. So the oceans would be shooting off into the air. So that doesn't seem likely. Even though God could do whatever he wants, he could, make it stop. He could make the planet stop and keep everything in order. He can do that. But it's kind of cool when he does things using science that he created. And we just may not understand enough science to see how it may have been done yet. But I'm hoping that's something we'll catch up on in heaven. Another one is the Earth's rotation slowed down. So instead of it taking 24 hours of a day, it turned it into 48 hours. I don't know. Which one of those do you like best? Here's the next one, number 6, divine intervention, theological significance. The most consistent perspective among biblical scholars like Chuck Missler is this: no natural explanation fully satisfies the text's uniqueness. The miracle underscores God's authority over time and creation. The event reflects a moment where cosmic order bent to divine purpose in response to a prophetic battle. Ultimately, no naturalistic model fully explains what Joshua records. As Missler often emphasized, quote, don't apologize for miracles, close quote. I like that. We're so busy trying to figure out the science behind it that sometimes we just need to step back and say, hey, it was a miracle. That's it. If God created time, he can suspend or alter it, right? Michael Heiser, while not focusing on the mechanics, observed that Joshua 10 is about Yahweh's supremacy over the sun and moon, the very deities worshipped by Israel's enemies. In other words, the miracle wasn't just about battle tactics, but about theological warfare. Just God saying, I'm sovereign. You guys are nothing. Nothing. I rule over you. You worship lesser gods. Let's hope we're not doing that. Maybe we should check ourselves. Check our spiritual pulse. Make sure we're not worshiping lesser gods. All right. Why does this matter? Who cares, right? Joshua's long day reminds us that, there it is, that word again, God is sovereign over creation. The heavens themselves bend to his purposes. What seems impossible for man is never impossible for God. The text invites us to consider not just how it happened, but why. And as Joshua 10:14 concludes, there has been no day like it before or since when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Why do we live such wimpy Christian lives? If we're saying, why aren't we believing what we're saying, I guess? If God is everything he says he is, what are we worried about? I mean, we've already, in a way, God has spoken to us in our present tense. What did I say? He's spoken future tense in our present tense. I mean, it says in Revelation what's going to happen, right? We win. The end. Satan gets a good ass whooping. So what are we worried about? Why are we moping around? Why are we sneaking around? Charlie Kirk wasn't sneaking, was he? No, he wasn't. He was out in the open, taking on the debate and doing it in a lovingly manner. Such a gifted genius. That's not something that I can do. I can't talk to liberals in a lovingly manner. It's not in my temperament to do so. But Charlie was beautiful at it. Christ-like about it. I got sidetracked again. In closing, I'll say this as you listen to Fighting Battle Warrior by Tata Music at pixabay.com. Well, I don't know what you took out of this. I know all of us go through life, and we have to go through this part of life where we get angry at God. You know, we get, as the young people, we get angry. Like this kid that assassinated Charlie. I guess he's angry, right? And he's so messed up. He wants to kill Charlie Kirk, or he assassinates Charlie Kirk because he's a fascist. But who's the fascist for executing Charlie Kirk? Isn't that what fascists do? It's so stupid. Pardon me. So we gotta fix ourselves. We gotta look at ourselves and we gotta say, am I being a wimpy Christian? Am I being bold? Am I speaking out? And you're like, yeah. I'm bold like Charlie Kirk. I speak out. Have you spoke out about the unborn? Have you spoken against transgender? Have you spoken against homosexuality? And when I say speak against them, I don't mean be preachy. I don't mean yelling and screaming or calling names. I mean showing people what the scripture has to say about it and how twisted it is and how perverted it is. Well, thank you for joining me as we explored another mysterious event in the Bible. Was it a miracle beyond nature, a miracle through nature? Either way, Joshua's day points us to a God who is Lord of heaven and earth. And when I say heaven, that's everything outside of earth. Whatever universe or universes are out there, he's Lord of them. Well, in our next episode, we'll be exploring another miracle or another biblical event. So until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep keeping the faith. And remember that God's sovereignty, the best plan for us is to trust and obey, for there is no better way. And you can wreck your life to figure it out for yourself. But I'm just here to say, you don't need to. You can take a little shortcut. Get with Jesus early. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to leave a review. Let me know what's going on with you. And tell your friends, family, relatives about the show. And until next time, stay safe.